Somebody arrest this black woman before she embarrasses every real officer in Washington. Officer Bradley Haines sneered as he ripped the military identification wallet from Aaliyah Monroe's hand and deliberately threw it onto the concrete sidewalk. The badge skidded beneath the shoes of stunned commuters, while sealed government documents scattered across the entrance. Bradley pointed at her and laughed loudly. "You honestly expect anyone to believe a black woman dressed like you commands America's military? That's the funniest scam I've seen all year." He looked around, inviting the crowd to join in. "Maybe next she'll tell us she's running the Pentagon. Somebody get a camera, I don't want anyone to miss this performance." A few uneasy chuckles echoed through the crowd. Bradley stepped closer until they were only inches apart. Real commanders earn respect. You walked in here hoping a fake badge and a confident voice would fool people. You're about to learn how that ends. Without another warning, he grabbed Aaliyah's wrists and snapped cold steel handcuffs around them. "You'll have plenty of time to explain your fantasy from a jail cell." Aaliyah never struggled. She calmly met his eyes. "Officer, I strongly recommend you answer your next phone call." Bradley smirked. "My next call can wait." At that exact moment, his phone illuminated with a secure incoming call. Pentagon Operations Center. He glanced at the screen, pressed decline, and unknowingly made the biggest mistake of his career. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from and your local time in the comments. If you believe no one should ever be judged by appearance alone, subscribe and stay until the end, because this story is only getting started. The morning had begun long before sunrise. Commander Aaliyah Monroe stood alone on the observation deck of Andrews Air Force Base, watching the first orange streaks of dawn stretch across the horizon. Her civilian coat fluttered lightly in the cool breeze, concealing the dark blue tactical uniform she had worn through an 18-hour overnight mission. Sleep could wait. The mission could not. Inside the secure hangar behind her, engineers were already disconnecting encrypted communication equipment from a military transport aircraft that had landed only minutes earlier. One of them hurried toward her carrying a black, reinforced government case, sealed with a bright red tamper strip. "Commander," the young technician said quietly, handing it over with both hands. "The secretary personally requested that this never leaves your possession." Aaliyah accepted the case with a calm nod. "I understand. The briefing starts in less than 70 minutes. I'll be there." The technician hesitated before adding one last sentence. "If anything delays delivery, the entire operation will be postponed." "I won't let that happen." She climbed into an unmarked government sedan, choosing to travel without an escort. The meeting she was attending was classified at the highest level, and discretion mattered more than appearances. Her credentials remained secured inside a simple leather identification wallet. Nothing about her clothing suggested rank or authority. To anyone passing by, she looked like an ordinary professional heading into another busy workday. That anonymity had protected countless missions before. Neither she nor anyone else imagined it would become the reason everything nearly collapsed. Nearly an hour later, traffic surrounding the Pentagon slowed to a crawl. Construction crews had narrowed several lanes, forcing commuters to funnel toward temporary checkpoints. Rather than remain trapped behind dozens of vehicles, Aaliyah parked legally several blocks away and continued on foot, carrying the reinforced government case in one hand. The sidewalks bustled with federal employees, military officers, contractors, tourists, and police directing traffic. Officer Bradley Haines had been working the intersection since 6 that morning. He enjoyed assignments near the Pentagon. Every shift brought opportunities to interact with generals, diplomats, and senior officials. More importantly, he believed it sharpened his instincts. Those instincts, he often reminded younger officers, had never failed him. As he scanned the morning crowd, something immediately caught his attention. A woman dressed in a plain charcoal coat, no visible insignia, comfortable walking shoes, an ordinary leather wallet clipped to her belt. Yet she carried a heavy black case marked with government security seals. Bradley narrowed his eyes. His training told him that something didn't fit. Instead of observing a little longer, he made his decision within seconds. He stepped directly into Aaliyah's path. "Morning." She stopped politely. "Good morning, officer. Mind telling me what's inside the case? I'm afraid I can't discuss its contents." Bradley's expression hardened. "Can't or won't. I'm authorized to deliver it directly to its destination." Destination? The Pentagon. Several pedestrians slowed as they passed. Bradley folded his arms. "Interesting." He motioned toward the identification wallet attached to her belt. "Let's see some credentials." Without hesitation, Aaliyah removed the wallet and handed it over. She remained completely relaxed. Bradley flipped it open. His eyebrows rose. Military identification. Restricted clearance markings. Commandé. He looked up again, then back down, then at her once more. A cynical smile spread across his face. You expect me to believe this? It isn't a matter of belief. It's authentic. He laughed under his breath. I've seen better fake IDs. Aaliyah spoke with the same calm tone she had used throughout countless crisis briefings. If you have any concerns, please contact the Department of Defense Verification Office. They'll confirm my identity immediately. Bradley ignored the suggestion. Instead, he examined her from head to toe. No service vehicle, no escort, no uniform, no security detail. He shook his head. This doesn't add up. It doesn't have to. My assignment doesn't require public visibility. That answer only irritated him more. People had started watching. A middle-aged businessman slowed his pace. Two tourists stopped beside a nearby food cart. Someone quietly raised a phone to record. Bradley noticed the attention and unconsciously straightened his posture. So you're saying you're some kind of military commander? Yes. And this case belongs to the United States government? Yes. And you expect me to simply wave you through? I expect standard verification procedures. For a brief moment, Bradley considered making the call she suggested. Then pride intervened. He had built a reputation on trusting his instinct. If he backed down now and she turned out to be a fraud, everyone watching would remember. He wasn't about to risk looking uncertain. Instead, he took one deliberate step closer. You know what I think? Aaliyah remained silent. I think someone found a fake credential online. I think someone borrowed a government case. And I think someone's about to find out impersonating a military officer is a federal crime. Aaliyah glanced briefly toward the towering Pentagon in the distance. Every passing minute tightened the schedule she had spent months preparing. Yet her expression never changed. Officer Haines, hearing his name, surprised him. How do you know my name? It's on your badge. A few people nearby smiled quietly. Bradley didn't. I'm asking you one last time. Call the verification office. You'll have your answer in less than 60 seconds. Instead of reaching for his radio, Bradley reached toward the reinforced case. His hand stopped just inches above the red security seal. Aaliyah's voice became firmer than before. Officer, do not break that seal. Something about the certainty in her words made even the nearby spectators hold their breath. Bradley looked directly into her eyes, then at the warning labels, then back at the growing crowd. In his mind, he was no longer deciding whether to verify her identity. He was deciding whether to expose what he believed was the boldest impersonation scheme he had ever encountered. He reached for the case. And the first irreversible mistake of that morning was only seconds away. Officer Bradley Haines rested one hand on the reinforced government case while locking eyes with Aaliyah Monroe. Funny, he said with a smug grin. The moment I touch this case, you suddenly get nervous. I'm not nervous, Aaliyah replied evenly. I'm trying to prevent you from making a mistake. Bradley chuckled loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. That's what people say when they're caught. The growing crowd formed a loose circle around them. Morning commuters slowed their pace. Several tourists stopped recording the Pentagon skyline and pointed their phones toward the confrontation instead. A young man whispered, "Is she really pretending to be military?" "I don't know," another replied. "But she doesn't look scared." That observation irritated Bradley more than he cared to admit. Most suspects argued. Some begged. Others panicked. This woman did none of those things. She simply stood there, shoulders relaxed, meeting his eyes with the quiet confidence of someone who believed time, not emotion, would prove her right. Bradley suddenly snatched the identification wallet from her hand again. He flipped it open dramatically. Commander Aaliyah Monroe. He read aloud with exaggerated disbelief. Well, that's impressive. He held the credential toward the crowd. Anyone can print fancy plastic these days. Aaliyah spoke calmly. The embedded security chip can be verified through the Department of Defense. Bradley ignored her. He turned the card over several times before shaking his head. No hologram I recognize. You aren't trained to recognize that classification. His jaw tightened. Oh, now you're telling me what I'm trained to recognize? I'm telling you, military credentials don't all use the same security standards. Instead of answering, Bradley slipped the credential into his own pocket. You'll get this back after the investigation. You cannot retain federal identification without documenting the chain of custody. Several people exchanged surprised looks. She sounded less like someone inventing excuses and more like someone quoting regulations from memory. Bradley refused to acknowledge the growing doubt around him. Instead, he circled Aaliyah slowly. No medals, no decorated uniform, no government vehicle, No armed escort. He stopped directly in front of her. And somehow I'm supposed to believe you're important enough to carry classified equipment into the Pentagon? I don't need you to believe it. I need you to verify it. Again, the same answer, the same calm tone. It felt almost insulting. Bradley took a slow breath before speaking louder. Ladies and gentlemen, the crowd instinctively turned toward him. This woman claims she's a military commander carrying sensitive government property. He paused dramatically. But she refuses to explain what's inside this case. A middle-aged woman asked quietly, "Couldn't he just make a phone call?" Bradley answered before Aaliyah could. "I've seen scams exactly like this." He pointed toward Aaliyah. "They count on people being too afraid to ask questions." Aaliyah finally spoke, her voice firm but controlled. "No, officer. I count on professionals following procedure." The words landed harder than she intended. A few people nodded. Bradley noticed. His pride flared. "You know what procedure says?" He stepped closer. "It says I determine whether something looks suspicious. And right now," he glanced deliberately at her plain charcoal coat. "Everything about this looks suspicious." Aaliyah didn't respond immediately. She simply looked toward the massive Pentagon building rising above the morning traffic. She imagined Colonel Jonathan Pierce checking his watch inside the secure conference room. She imagined Secretary Evelyn Marshall delaying the briefing. She imagined dozens of senior officers waiting for encrypted authorization that only she could provide. Every passing minute mattered. Yet revealing classified information in public would violate everything she had sworn to protect. She looked back at Bradley. "I have cooperated with every lawful request. I identified myself. I presented my credentials. I advised you how to verify them. There is nothing more I can legally provide." Bradley smiled. "There it is. The confession. No. The refusal." He reached for his radio. "Dispatch." The speaker crackled to life. "Go ahead. I've got a possible federal impersonation case outside the Pentagon checkpoint." Several heads turned immediately. Bradley continued speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Adult female, claims to be military command staff. Possession of suspected fraudulent federal credentials." Aaliyah closed her eyes briefly, not out of fear, out of disappointment. When Bradley finished the report, dispatch responded. "Do you require verification through defense liaison?" For the first time that morning, an easy solution was placed directly in front of him. One sentence. One confirmation. Less than a minute. Instead, Bradley answered without hesitation. "Negative. I've got probable cause." Aaliyah slowly opened her eyes. "Officer Haines, you've just declined the very procedure designed to prevent mistakes like this." "I'm preventing one." "No, you've become one." The words were quiet, almost gentle, yet they struck harder than any shouted accusation. Bradley's face reddened. He took 2 determined steps forward until only inches separated them. "You know what I think?" Aaliyah remained silent. "I think you've convinced yourself you're smarter than everyone else. I think you expected people to panic the second you flashed that fake badge. And I think you're about to discover federal prison isn't nearly as comfortable as pretending to be a commander." Before Aaliyah could answer, another voice cut through the crowd. "Officer!" Everyone turned. An Army officer in operational uniform was jogging across the sidewalk from a nearby security entrance. Captain Ethan Caldwell. His eyes immediately landed on the reinforced government case. Then on the red security seal. His expression changed instantly. "Officer Haines," he called. "Please don't touch." Bradley held up a hand. "Stay out of this." Captain Caldwell slowed but didn't stop. "I believe I know what that." I said, "Stay back." The captain looked directly at Aaliyah. She gave the slightest shake of her head. "Not yet." He understood. Military discipline overruled instinct. He stopped where he stood. Bradley interpreted the hesitation as uncertainty. He smirked. "Say, even he can't identify her." Captain Caldwell answered carefully. "I'm asking you to verify before taking further action." Bradley laughed. "I don't take orders from captains." The crowd grew even quieter. Captain Caldwell's eyes moved from Bradley to Aaliyah once more. For the first time, genuine concern crossed his face, because he knew something Bradley did not. If Commander Aaliyah Monroe had failed to reach the Pentagon by now, someone inside that building was already asking why. And when that question reached the right people, everything outside this checkpoint was about to change. Captain Ethan Caldwell stood frozen only a few yards away, his jaw tightening as Officer Bradley Haines dismissed him with an impatient wave. "I said stay back," Bradley repeated. "This is a police investigation." Ethan inhaled slowly. "Officer Haines, I'm asking you one last time to contact the Department of Defense liaison." Bradley laughed. "You military people really stick together, don't you? I don't know this woman personally. Then why are you so interested? Because I've seen that security seal before. Bradley's eyes briefly shifted toward the reinforced government case resting beside Aaliyah's feet. The bright red tamper strip displayed several warning labels, though most were printed in technical language unfamiliar to civilians. One label simply read, "Authorized personnel only." Bradley scoffed. "Looks expensive." "It isn't about the price," Ethan answered carefully. "It's about authorization." Bradley rolled his eyes. "You're dismissed, Captain." The crowd watched in complete silence. Some had started live streaming. Others whispered among themselves. The confidence Bradley had displayed only minutes earlier was beginning to divide public opinion. One elderly man quietly muttered, "The Army captain doesn't seem to think she's lying." A woman beside him nodded. "Why won't the officer just verify her ID?" Bradley heard both comments. His pride refused to let him reconsider. Instead, he turned toward Aaliyah. "Hands behind your back." She remained motionless. "Officer Haines, placing me under arrest will interfere with an active federal assignment. That's not my problem. It will become yours." He stepped closer. "Enough." The cold steel cuffs clicked shut around her wrists. The sharp metallic sound echoed across the sidewalk. Several people visibly flinched, yet Aaliyah showed almost no reaction. No struggle, no raised voice, no anger, only quiet disappointment. Bradley pulled her toward his patrol vehicle. "You're under arrest for suspected impersonation of a military officer, possession of fraudulent federal credentials, and obstruction of a police investigation." "I have obstructed nothing. You've refused to cooperate." "I cooperated with every lawful request." "You refused to answer my questions." "I refuse to disclose classified information." Bradley smirked. Convenient excuse. Without warning, he removed the government identification wallet from his pocket and dropped it into an evidence bag. Then he reached toward the reinforced case. Aaliyah's calm expression changed for the first time. Not fear, urgency. "Officer." He ignored her. "Do not open that case. I'll decide what gets opened. The contents are protected under federal security protocol." Bradley grabbed the handle. "I don't recognize your protocol." "You don't need to. You only need to preserve the chain of custody." He shook his head. "I've had enough military jargon." He tugged at the red security seal. Before it could break, Captain Ethan Caldwell took an involuntary step forward. "Stop." His voice rang across the entire checkpoint. Every conversation instantly ceased. Bradley looked up. "What now?" "If you break that seal without authorization, you may compromise federal property." Bradley folded his arms. "So now you're threatening me?" "I'm warning you. There is a difference." Bradley stared at him for several seconds, then deliberately released the seal. Not because he believed Ethan, because opening the case in public could complicate the arrest paperwork. "I'll let evidence technicians deal with it." Aaliyah quietly exhaled. For the first time that morning, one disaster had been avoided, but a much larger one was already unfolding. Bradley escorted her into the rear seat of the patrol vehicle. As the door closed, Aaliyah looked through the window toward the Pentagon skyline. She knew Colonel Jonathan Pierce would already be waiting. He never started classified briefings late, not unless something had gone terribly wrong. Inside the Operations Coordination Center beneath the Pentagon, exactly that realization was beginning to spread. Colonel Pierce checked the digital clock mounted above the secure conference table. Commander Monroe should have arrived 12 minutes earlier. He looked toward the empty chair reserved for her. Still vacant. Secretary Evelyn Marshall entered the room carrying a classified briefing folder. "Has Commander Monroe checked in?" "No, Madam Secretary." "Traffic?" "We've contacted the motor pool. No government vehicle was assigned." The secretary frowned. "Call her secure phone." Pierce immediately complied. The encrypted line attempted to connect. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. A communications officer looked up from his console. Commander Monroe's encrypted device was active 23 minutes ago. And now? It appears stationary. Pierce's expression darkened. "Location?" The technician hesitated. "I'll need authorization." "You have it." Fingers raced across the keyboard. Several tense seconds passed. Then a blinking icon appeared on the secure map. Not inside the Pentagon. Not inside any military installation. The signal sat motionless several blocks away. Near a Metropolitan Police patrol unit, Pierce stared at the screen. "That's impossible." The communications officer swallowed. "The encrypted device hasn't moved since." Secretary Marshall's voice became noticeably firmer. "Contact the local department immediately." Back outside, Bradley climbed into the driver's seat. His police radio crackled before he could start the engine. "Unit 12. He pressed the microphone. "Go ahead." "Telephone request from a federal liaison office." Bradley sighed. "I'm transporting a suspect. They're requesting immediate contact." "They can wait." "It's marked urgent." Bradley glanced into the rearview mirror. Aaliyah Monroe. She said nothing. That silence somehow irritated him even more. He picked up the radio again. Advise them I'll return the call after booking. He ended the transmission before dispatch could respond. The patrol car pulled away from the curb. Captain Ethan Caldwell watched it disappear into traffic. His instincts screamed that every passing block made the situation worse. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his own secure phone, and dialed a number few people even knew existed. The call connected after a single ring. This is Captain Ethan Caldwell. I need to report a possible interference with a classified Department of Defense operation. Inside the patrol car, Bradley drove confidently toward the precinct. He believed the hardest part of his morning was over. He couldn't have known that 3 separate federal agencies were already trying to locate the woman sitting quietly behind him. Nor could he imagine that before he finished the arrest paperwork, the entire police station would become the center of a national security response. The Arlington Police Precinct looked no different from any other weekday morning. Officers filled out reports. Dispatchers answered emergency calls. Detectives hurried through the hallway carrying thick case folders. Nobody noticed the patrol car pulling into the secured parking area. Officer Bradley Haines stepped out first, wearing the satisfied expression of someone convinced he had just prevented a serious federal crime. He opened the rear door. Out, Commander Aaliyah Monroe calmly stepped onto the pavement, her hands still restrained. Several officers glanced toward her before returning to their work. To them, she appeared to be another suspect brought in for processing. Bradley walked beside her toward the booking entrance. I hope you've thought of a better story. Aaliyah answered quietly. I've been thinking about something else. What's that? How many people are about to be affected by this delay? Bradley laughed. The only person affected is you. Inside the station, Sergeant Melissa Grant looked up from her desk. She had served 20 years in law enforcement. Experience had taught her that the loudest arrests were rarely the most important. Bradley placed the evidence bag containing Aaliyah's identification wallet on the counter. Possible federal impersonation. Melissa reached for the wallet. You verified it? I didn't need to. She raised an eyebrow. You didn't contact defense? Bradley shrugged. I've seen enough fake credentials to know one when I see it. Melissa slowly opened the wallet. The identification card looked unlike any military credential she had encountered. There was no obvious branch insignia. No familiar formatting. Instead, several security markings appeared intentionally understated, almost hidden. She looked back at Bradley. Where's the case she was carrying? Bradley pointed toward the reinforced government case resting on a nearby evidence cart. Melissa immediately noticed the bright red tamper seal. Printed beneath it were words that made her pause. Authorized federal access only. Her expression became noticeably more serious. You opened it? No. Good. Bradley frowned. You actually think this is real? I think I've learned not to assume. Before Bradley could answer, the station's main phone rang. The desk officer picked it up. Arlington Police Department. A brief silence followed. The officer covered the receiver. They're asking for the arresting officer. Bradley walked over confidently. This is Officer Haines. His confident smile slowly faded. I'm sorry. Who did you say you were? Several nearby officers glanced toward him. Bradley listened for only a few more seconds before shaking his head. No, I can't release an active suspect based on a phone call. He hung up. Melissa stared at him. Who was it? Some civilian claiming to represent the Department of Defense. Did they identify themselves? They gave a name. What name? Bradley waved dismissively. Probably fake. Across the room, Aaliyah remained seated exactly where officers had instructed her. She neither interrupted nor reacted. Her calmness unsettled. Melissa far more than panic ever would have. Most innocent people demanded lawyers. Most guilty people invented excuses. This woman simply waited, almost as if she already knew how everything would end. Melissa approached her. Ma'am. Aaliyah looked up. Would you like some water? Thank you. Melissa returned moments later with a bottle. You've been unusually cooperative. I respect the law. Even when it's wrong, I especially respect it then. Melissa studied her face. There was exhaustion around her eyes. Not fear, fatigue, the kind earned after days without proper rest. You really are military, aren't you? Aaliyah answered carefully. I've never claimed to be anything else. Before Melissa could continue, shouting erupted from the communications room. Sergeant. She hurried inside. A dispatcher pointed toward a computer screen. The same number has called 6 times. Who? They won't say much. They only keep asking one question. Melissa frowned. What question? Has Commander Aaliyah Monroe been released? The room fell silent. Melissa looked back through the glass toward the booking area. Aaliyah sat exactly where she had been left, hands folded quietly in front of her. almost motionless. Melissa returned to Bradley. You need to hear this. I already know. No, you don't. She lowered her voice. They're asking for Commander Monroe. Bradley crossed his arms. So? They called her Commander. They're helping her. They've called 6 times. They're persistent. Melissa became visibly frustrated. Bradley, just verify the identification. No, it takes less than a minute. I'm not letting some scam artist manipulate this department. Their conversation ended abruptly as a loud electronic tone echoed throughout the station. Everyone turned. Kevin Walsh, the department's civilian technology specialist, stood beside the evidence cart. He looked genuinely concerned. Who brought this in? Bradley pointed toward the reinforced government case. I did. Kevin swallowed. I scanned the exterior barcode into evidence. And? It isn't a barcode. What do you mean? It responded. The room grew quiet. Kevin rotated his laptop so everyone could see. Instead of opening an evidence record, the scanner displayed a single message in bold red letters. Restricted defense asset. Unauthorized custody detected. Automatic status alert transmitted. Bradley's confidence faltered for the first time. What exactly does that mean? Kevin looked pale. I honestly don't know. But whatever system this belongs to. He pointed toward the flashing notification. It now knows where this case is. At that exact moment, deep beneath the Pentagon, another alarm illuminated inside the National Defense Operations Center. Colonel Jonathan Pierce looked up sharply as the large digital map changed from yellow to bright red. A computer-generated voice echoed across the command room. Restricted asset located. Custody anomaly confirmed. Commander unavailable. Secretary Evelyn Marshall stood slowly. Initiate Level 1 recovery. Around the room, officers immediately sprang into motion. Encrypted phones began ringing. Military police were alerted. Defense investigators were notified. Vehicles were assigned. One commander quietly asked the question everyone else was thinking. What if this isn't an accident? Secretary Marshall answered without hesitation. We prepare for the worst. Back at the Arlington precinct, nobody yet understood what had just begun. But outside the station, the first black SUVs had already left the Pentagon, and every minute brought them closer. The flashing warning remained frozen on Kevin Walsh's monitor. Restricted defense asset. Unauthorized custody detected. No one in the room spoke. Kevin slowly looked at Bradley. I've processed evidence for 12 years. I've never seen anything like this. Bradley folded his arms, refusing to show uncertainty. It's probably another scare tactic. Kevin shook his head. This didn't come from the internet. It came from somewhere that recognized this device the instant I scanned it. Sergeant Melissa Grant stepped closer to the monitor. Can you trace where the alert was sent? Kevin typed rapidly. Several windows appeared before abruptly disappearing. Then another message filled the screen. Remote access denied. Federal authority required. Kevin leaned back. They just locked us out. Bradley's patience was wearing thin. Enough. Put the case in evidence. We'll let federal investigators sort it out later. Melissa immediately objected. If this really belongs to the Department of Defense, we shouldn't even be touching it. Bradley looked directly at her. So now you're taking orders from a computer? No. I'm following common sense. Across the booking area, Aaliyah Monroe quietly observed the conversation. Her expression hadn't changed. She wasn't watching Bradley. She was watching the clock mounted above the reception desk. 9 to 17 a.m. The classified briefing should have started nearly 45 minutes earlier. Colonel Jonathan Pierce would already know something was wrong. The only question left was how much they had discovered. Melissa walked toward the holding bench. She stopped several feet away. Commandé. For the first time since the arrest, she deliberately used the title. Aaliyah noticed. You've changed your mind. Melissa nodded slightly. I'm beginning to think we made one. Aaliyah offered a feint. You still have time to fix it. Melissa lowered her voice. If I remove those handcuffs without authorization, I'll lose my badge. If you leave them on much longer, Aaliyah glanced toward the reinforced case. Someone else may lose far more. Before Melissa could ask what she meant, every telephone inside the station rang almost simultaneously. Desk phones, administrative lines, conference room extensions, even the captain's private office. The sound echoed through every hallway. Officers exchanged confused looks. Dispatch answered the first call. Her face immediately turned pale. She stood. Chief. Chief Leonard Grayson had just entered the station carrying a coffee cup and several reports. He frowned. What happened? The Department of Defense is calling. So transfer them. They're already on every line. Grayson blinked. What? Another dispatcher raised her hand. So are two federal agencies. A third voice came from the communications room, and someone identifying themselves as the Pentagon Operations Center. The chief looked around the room. Every phone continued ringing. His eyes slowly settled on Bradley. "What exactly did you arrest?" Bradley answered confidently. "A woman pretending to be military command staff." Chief Grayson looked toward Aaliyah. She sat perfectly still, calm, patient, almost dignified. Nothing about her resembled the unstable suspects he dealt with every week. He turned back to Bradley. "Did you verify her credentials?" "No." The chief's expression hardened. "Why not?" "I knew they were fake." "You knew, or you assumed?" Bradley hesitated. "Only briefly. I trusted my instincts." Chief Grayson looked toward Melissa. "What do you think?" Melissa didn't answer immediately. Instead, she handed him Aaliyah's identification wallet. The chief opened it. Unlike Bradley, he didn't laugh. Instead, he studied every detail carefully. He noticed the embedded security chip, the microprinting, the unusual seal. Then he looked at the rank. Commandant. His years working alongside federal agencies told him something important. Fake credentials almost always exaggerated. They copied familiar designs. This card did neither. It looked intentionally understated, almost impossible to duplicate. He slowly closed the wallet. "Call defense verification." Bradley's voice rose. "Chief, that's an order." Before anyone could move, another sound interrupted them. A deep electronic chime echoed from the reinforced government case. Everyone turned instantly. The red security indicator, dark until now, began flashing. Once, twice, then steadily. Kevin's eyes widened. "It activated. I thought you said it was off." "It was." Another soft tone echoed through the room. Then a calm, computerized voice emerged from inside the case. "Authorized holder status. Not detected." Several officers instinctively stepped backward. The voice continued. "Recovery protocol active. Federal response in progress." Silence swallowed the station. Even Bradley stared at the case. "What is that?" Kevin swallowed hard. I think it just announced someone's coming." No one laughed. No one moved. Chief Grayson immediately pointed toward the evidence cart. "Nobody touches that case." Melissa nodded. "You heard him." Bradley finally spoke. "This doesn't prove she's military." "No," Kevin answered quietly, "but it proves that case belongs to somebody powerful enough to build technology I've never seen before." Across town, a convoy of 6 black armored SUVs exited the Pentagon through a secured gate. Military police motorcycles cleared intersections. Civilian traffic was diverted. Inside the lead vehicle sat Lieutenant General Robert Whitaker. Beside him was Special Agent Rebecca Sloan from the Department of Defense Criminal Investigative Service. She reviewed a tablet displaying Aaliyah Monroe's service record. "Commander Monroe has never missed a briefing." Whitaker nodded. "Not once." "Her clearance?" "Above ours for this operation." Rebecca looked up. "So a local officer arrested someone carrying a restricted defense asset and ignored verification requests." Whitaker's expression remained unreadable. "If that's accurate," he looked out the window. "This will become a very long day for someone." Back at the precinct, Chief Grayson finally reached for the secure telephone on his desk. He took one slow breath before pressing the blinking line marked Department of Defense. As the call connected, every officer in the station unconsciously stopped what they were doing. No one realized they were only moments away from learning the identity of the quiet black woman sitting in handcuffs. And once that truth was spoken aloud, nothing inside the Arlington Police Department would ever be the same again. Chief Leonard Grayson held the secure phone against his ear without saying a word. The entire station had fallen silent. Every officer watched him. After several seconds, a calm voice came through the receiver. "This is the Department of Defense Operations Center." Chief Grayson cleared his throat. "This is Chief Leonard Grayson with the Arlington Police Department. We received several calls regarding a woman currently in our custody." The voice answered immediately. "State the name on her identification." Grayson looked at the military credential. "Commander Aaliyah Monroe." Silence. Not ordinary silence. The kind that made every heartbeat inside the station suddenly feel louder. When the voice returned, it sounded noticeably different, more urgent. "Chief Grayson. Is Commander Monroe physically unharmed?" Grayson glanced toward Aaliyah. "Yes." "Is she still in possession of Defense Asset 79? "No." "We secured the case." The voice stopped him immediately. "No, Chief. You did not secure it. You detained a nationally protected defense asset." Grayson felt his stomach tighten. "I'm sorry?" "Do not attempt to open the case. Do not disconnect its power. Do not relocate it. And under absolutely no circumstances should Commander Monroe remain restrained." The room became so quiet that even Bradley could hear every word coming from the speaker. His confidence began to crack. Grayson slowly lowered the phone. Before he could respond, Bradley stepped forward. "Chief, they're manipulating us." Grayson turned sharply. "Be quiet." Bradley blinked. "Sir?" I said, "Be quiet." It was the first time in years anyone inside the department had heard that tone from their chief. Grayson returned to the phone. "I'm requesting formal verification." "You'll have it." The voice answered calmly. "Our recovery team is less than 4 minutes away." The call ended. Every pair of eyes slowly shifted toward Bradley. He forced a laugh. "Recovery team? Seriously? This is ridiculous." Melissa Grant folded her arms. "Is it?" Bradley looked around. "Come on. Anybody can claim to be defense." Kevin quietly rotated his laptop toward everyone. The warning screen had changed again. A live countdown now appeared beneath the flashing alert. "Federal response ETA, 3:41. Bradley's smile disappeared. "What kind of prank updates itself?" Kevin swallowed. "I don't think this is a prank anymore." Outside the station, the low rumble of heavy engines echoed through the morning streets. No seatings, no flashing emergency lights, only a disciplined convoy moving with unmistakable precision. Pedestrians instinctively stepped aside. Traffic officers halted vehicles without being asked. 6 black armored SUVs turned into the station entrance one after another. Behind them came military police vehicles. Then, another unmarked sedan. Every engine stopped simultaneously. The parking lot fell eerily still. Inside the precinct, a young patrol officer hurried toward the front windows. "Oh," someone beside him whispered. "What is it?" The officer stared outside. "There are soldiers." More officers walked over. No one spoke. Outside, uniformed military police exited their vehicles first. Each moved with calm efficiency. No weapons were drawn. No voices were raised. Their professionalism alone transformed the atmosphere. Bradley frowned. "They're overreacting." Melissa looked at him in disbelief. "They haven't even come inside yet." The front entrance opened. Special Agent Rebecca Sloan entered first. She wore a simple dark suit with a Department of Defense credential displayed openly. Behind her walked Lieutenant General Robert Whitaker. 3 silver stars gleamed on his shoulders. The conversations inside the station ended instantly. Even officers who had never served in the military recognized the rank. General Whitaker surveyed the room only once. His eyes ignored Bradley, ignored the chief, ignored every officer present. Instead, they stopped on Aaliyah Monroe, still seated, still handcuffed. For the first time since entering the building, emotion crossed the general's face. Not anger. Respect. He walked directly toward her. Every boot step echoed through the station. Bradley instinctively moved into his path. "General, this woman is under arrest pending." Whitaker never even looked at him. "Move." The single word carried decades of command. Bradley hesitated. Rebecca Sloan calmly stepped between them. "Officer, I strongly advise you to comply." Bradley reluctantly stepped aside. General Whitaker continued forward until he stood directly in front of Aaliyah. Without saying a word, he came to full military attention. Every military member in the room immediately followed. Then, with flawless precision, Lieutenant General Robert Whitaker raised his hand in a formal salute. The station froze. Nobody breathed. Nobody moved. "Good morning." His voice remained calm. "Commander Monroe." Aaliyah slowly stood despite the handcuffs. She returned the salute as best she could. "Good morning, General." Chief Grayson felt every ounce of color drain from his face. Melissa closed her eyes briefly. Kevin stared in disbelief. Only Bradley remained frozen where he stood. His mind refused to process what he was seeing. Rebecca Sloan turned toward the chief. "Who authorized placing handcuffs on Commander Monroe?" Grayson answered quietly. "Officer Bradley Haines." She nodded once. "Who confiscated her federal credentials?" "Officer Haines." "Who ignored repeated verification requests from the Department of Defense?" No one answered. Rebecca already knew. She looked directly at Bradley. "Officer, please surrender your duty weapon." The words hit him harder than any accusation. "What?" "Now. I'm still on duty." Rebecca's expression never changed, not for the next few minutes. Bradley instinctively looked toward Chief Grayson. Surely the chief would stop this. Instead, Grayson spoke without hesitation. "Officer Haines, remove your weapon." Bradley's breathing became shallow. "Chief, do it." Slowly, almost mechanically, Bradley unclipped his holster and placed his service weapon on the counter. For the first time all morning, he realized the situation was no longer under his control. Then Rebecca Sloan produced a sealed federal folder. She placed it carefully on the booking counter. The Department of Defense has assumed jurisdiction. Everything that happens from this moment forward will be recorded as part of a federal investigation. The room remained silent. But one question still lingered in everyone's mind. If a three-star general had saluted Commander Aaliyah Monroe, who exactly was she? And why would the Pentagon mobilize this level of response? For one woman, no one inside the Arlington Police Department dared to speak. The only sound came from the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Officer Bradley Haines stood motionless, staring at the three-star general who had just saluted the woman he had handcuffed less than an hour earlier. His mind refused to accept what his eyes had witnessed. General Robert Whitaker lowered his salute only after Commander Aaliyah Monroe returned it as best she could with her wrists still restrained. His expression hardened. He slowly turned toward Chief Leonard Grayson. "Chief." Grayson stepped forward immediately. "Yes, General. Remove those handcuffs." Grayson didn't hesitate. He personally took the handcuff key from his duty belt and walked toward Aaliyah. "I'm deeply sorry, Commander." Aaliyah gave him a small nod. "I understand you're correcting the situation." The cuffs clicked open. Deep red marks remained around her wrists. Melissa Grant quietly looked away. She suddenly remembered every calm warning Aaliyah had offered since the arrest. She had never threatened anyone, never raised her voice, never once claimed she was above the law. She had simply asked them to verify. Chief Grayson handed the cuffs back to Bradley. His voice was low enough that only nearby officers could hear. "You should have made one phone call." Bradley couldn't answer. Rebecca Sloan stepped toward the evidence cart. "Commandez." She gestured toward the reinforced government case. "Please verify asset integrity." Aaliyah approached the case. Every person inside the station instinctively watched. She placed her right hand against a small black panel almost invisible beneath the handle. Nothing happened. Then she looked directly into a tiny sensor beside the security seal. A soft blue light swept across her face. A quiet electronic tone echoed through the room. The red warning indicator disappeared. The security seal changed from crimson to green. Kevin Walsh gasped. I've never seen biometric authentication built into a transport case." Aaliyah calmly entered a short authorization code. The computerized voice returned. "Authorized commander verified. Chain of custody restored. National security alert canceled." Every officer looked at Kevin. He slowly nodded. It just canceled whatever emergency was happening. General Whitaker finally spoke. It canceled a level 1 defense recovery. No one inside the station seemed to understand what that meant. Rebecca Sloan answered for them. When Commander Monroe disappeared, every possibility had to be considered. Terrorism, espionage, kidnapping, compromise of classified technology. Bradley's face slowly drained of color. Rebecca continued. "Do you understand now why multiple federal agencies contacted this station?" Nobody answered, because nobody had imagined that one wrongful arrest had triggered a national security response. Chief Grayson looked toward Aaliyah. "Commandez, if you're able to tell us, what exactly was inside that case?" She remained silent for a moment. Then she looked toward General Whitaker. He gave a slight nod. She turned back to the room. "I can only discuss what has been declassified." She rested one hand gently on the case. "This contains the primary quantum encryption module for the Sentinel Orbital Defense Network." Blank expressions filled the room. She continued. "The system protects military satellite communications from hostile intrusion." Kevin whispered under his breath. "May God." Aaliyah nodded once. "This module was required for today's strategic authorization meeting." Bradley stared at the case. "So, because I arrested you, the meeting was delayed." "Yes." Chief Grayson swallowed. "How important was that meeting?" General Whitaker answered instead. "It involved the security posture of every American military satellite currently supporting active global operations." The words hit the room like a physical force. No one moved. No one even shifted their weight. Bradley suddenly remembered Aaliyah's warning. Every minute you delay matters far more than you realize. She hadn't exaggerated. She had understated it. Rebecca Sloan opened the federal folder she had carried into the station. Inside were photographs, commendations, and classified authorization documents. She removed only those cleared for public viewing. One photograph showed Aaliyah standing beside the Secretary of Defense. Another showed her receiving a Distinguished Civilian Service Medal. A third showed her briefing senior military commanders inside the Pentagon. Chief Grayson looked from the photographs to the woman standing only a few feet away. The quiet black woman Bradley had mocked in front of dozens of strangers was one of the nation's most trusted defense leaders. Melissa quietly shook her head. "You never told us." Aaliyah answered gently. "I wasn't permitted to." You could have demanded special treatment. No, I asked for lawful treatment. Those 6 words echoed through the room. Not special treatment. Lawful treatment. General Whitaker looked toward Bradley for the first time. What did Commander Monroe request when you stopped her? Bradley struggled to answer. She asked me to verify her identity. What else? She told me not to open the case. What else? Bradley closed his eyes. She told me to answer my phone. Whitaker nodded slowly. And what did you do? Bradley's voice barely rose above a whisper. I ignored every warning. Rebecca Sloan stepped beside him. The Department of Defense recorded every unanswered verification request. She placed several printed call logs on the counter. 12 calls. 3 encrypted notifications. 1 direct operations center contact. She looked directly into Bradley's eyes. You declined every one. His shoulders collapsed. There was no argument left. No explanation. No excuse. Outside the station, more federal vehicles continued arriving. Members of the Defense Criminal Investigative Service began securing surveillance footage. Military police established a discreet perimeter. News helicopters circled in the distance, unaware of what had happened inside. General Whitaker checked his watch. Commandé. The secretary is waiting. Aaliyah picked up the government case. Before leaving, she paused. She looked once around the room. At Melissa. At Kevin. At Chief Grayson. Finally, at Bradley. Her voice remained calm. I hope today reminds everyone here that authority isn't recognized by appearance. It's recognized by truth. Then she turned toward the exit. But before she could take another step, a voice echoed from the doorway. Commandé. Everyone turned. Inspector Marcus Reed from Internal Affairs had just entered the station, and in his hand was an emergency suspension order bearing Officer Bradley Haines' name. Inspector Marcus Reed walked through the entrance with measured confidence, accompanied by 2 Internal Affairs investigators dressed in dark business suits. The room fell silent once again. He held a sealed document in one hand and a tablet computer in the other. His eyes went directly to Officer Bradley Haines. Officer Bradley Haines. Bradley looked up weakly. Yes. Marcus handed him the envelope. By authority of the Arlington Police Department's Office of Professional Standards, you are hereby placed on immediate administrative suspension pending a federal and internal investigation. Bradley's fingers trembled as he accepted the document. This can't be happening. Marcus remained expressionless. It already has. Rebecca Sloan stepped beside Marcus and placed another folder on the booking counter. The Department of Defense Criminal Investigative Service has formally requested all body camera footage, surveillance recordings, dispatch logs, evidence records, and communication transcripts connected to today's incident. Chief Leonard Grayson immediately nodded. You'll have complete access. Marcus looked around the station. Has anyone altered evidence? No. Deleted recordings? No. Opened the government case? No. General Robert Whitaker answered before anyone else could. Fortunately, no. Rebecca exhaled quietly. Then the damage, while significant, remains recoverable. Kevin Walsh hurried toward the evidence server. Within moments, every monitor inside the communications room displayed synchronized security footage. Marcus pointed toward the largest screen. Play the body camera recording. The video began. The station watched in complete silence. There was Bradley standing outside the Pentagon checkpoint. The recording clearly captured Aaliyah removing her identification without hesitation. It showed her calmly handing over the credential. Then everyone heard her voice. If you have concerns, please contact the Department of Defense Verification Office. They'll confirm my identity immediately. Marcus paused the footage. He looked toward Bradley. Did you make that verification call? Bradley's voice barely escaped. No. The recording continued. Again, Aaliyah spoke. Please don't break the security seal. Again. Bradley laughed. The footage moved forward. Aaliyah warned him another time. Officer, I strongly recommend you answer your next phone call. The video captured Bradley looking directly at his phone. The screen clearly displayed Pentagon Operations Center. Without hesitation, he pressed decline. The room remained perfectly still. Marcus paused the video once more. Officer Haines, were you aware that this call was being recorded by your body camera? Bradley closed his eyes. No. Marcus nodded. It was. He turned toward Chief Grayson. The evidence speaks for itself. Rebecca Sloan quietly added another document to the growing stack. 12 incoming calls, 3 encrypted alerts, 2 requests through dispatch, 1 direct notification to your communications center. She looked at Bradley. You rejected every opportunity to verify Commander Monroe's identity. Chief Grayson slowly removed his reading glasses. I trained you. Bradley stared at the floor. You taught every officer in this department that assumptions destroy investigations. His voice broke. I know. So why? Bradley swallowed. Then, for the first time all day, his confidence disappeared completely. I looked at her. I looked at the clothes. I looked at the badge. And I convinced myself I already knew the truth. No one interrupted him. I stopped investigating, because I believed my first impression. Melissa Grant quietly lowered her head. Those words hurt everyone wearing a badge. Not because Bradley had admitted his mistake, because every officer understood how easily certainty could replace professionalism. General Whitaker finally stepped forward. Officer Haines. Bradley looked up. You weren't required to trust Commander Monroe. You were required to follow procedure. He paused. Those are two very different things. Bradley couldn't answer. Rebecca Sloan turned toward Aaliyah. Commandez. The secretary has authorized a limited disclosure. Aaliyah nodded. Rebecca addressed the room. For the record, Commander Aaliyah Monroe currently serves as Operational Commander of Sentinel Defense Integration. She leads joint coordination involving encrypted satellite communications, supporting multiple branches of the United States Armed Forces. Several officers instinctively straightened their posture. Rebecca continued. Her clearance level exceeds that of nearly everyone in this room. She looked briefly toward General Whitaker, including mine. A stunned silence followed. Chief Grayson stared at Aaliyah in disbelief. So the briefing, General Whitaker answered, was attended by the Secretary of Defense, Joint Chiefs Representatives, Cyber Command leadership, and intelligence officials. Kevin whispered, and all of them were waiting for her. Yes. Rebecca placed one final photograph onto the counter. It showed Aaliyah standing at a secure operations console, briefing senior military leaders during a previous national security exercise. The date beneath the photograph was only 3 weeks old. Chief Grayson slowly approached Aaliyah. His voice was filled with genuine regret. Commander Monroe, on behalf of every honest officer in this department, I apologize. He removed his service cap. Then, unexpectedly, Melissa Grant did the same. Honneur be honneur. Every officer inside the station removed their caps. No one had instructed them to. It was simply the only gesture of respect that felt appropriate. Aaliyah looked around the room. I accept your apology, Chief. She glanced toward the officers. But remember, my dignity wasn't restored because people finally discovered who I was. She paused. It should never have been taken away before they knew. Those words settled heavily over everyone present. Even Marcus Reed quietly nodded. Rebecca Sloan closed her investigation folder. The Department of Defense has completed identity confirmation. Marcus looked toward Bradley. Internal Affairs has not. He removed another document from his briefcase. This investigation now includes allegations of unlawful detention, failure to follow verification procedures, abuse of authority, interference with a federal operation, and conduct unbecoming an officer. Bradley's hands began shaking. Outside, camera flashes illuminated the station windows. The media had finally arrived. But none of them knew the most important truth yet. Commander Aaliyah Monroe wasn't interested in revenge. She was interested in making sure no innocent person, regardless of race, appearance, or profession, would ever endure what she had just experienced. And that decision would become the most powerful moment of all. The crowd outside the Arlington Police Department had doubled in less than 30 minutes. News vans lined both sides of the street. Reporters stood behind temporary barricades, each trying to determine why military vehicles surrounded an ordinary police station. Inside, however, the atmosphere remained remarkably quiet. Commander Aaliyah Monroe stood beside the reinforced government case, while Lieutenant General Robert Whitaker reviewed the final transfer documents with Special Agent Rebecca Sloan. Chief Leonard Grayson approached slowly. His shoulders looked heavier than they had only an hour earlier. Commander Monroe. She turned toward him. I've spent 31 years wearing this badge. I've always told young officers that humility keeps good people honest. He looked briefly toward Bradley Haines, who now sat alone at a nearby desk, his duty belt removed and his badge resting inside an evidence envelope. Today we failed to live by that lesson. Aaliyah answered gently. One officer made the decision, but every organization must decide what it learns afterward. Grayson nodded. It will. He extended a neatly prepared folder. I've signed an emergency directive requiring mandatory federal identity verification training for every officer in this department. He paused. No officer under my command will ever ignore verification procedures again. Rebecca Sloan accepted the document. The Department of Defense appreciates your cooperation. General Whitaker added quietly, accountability begins with admitting failure. Chief Grayson looked directly at Bradley. and it ends with accepting responsibility. Bradley slowly stood. He no longer resembled the confident officer who had laughed outside the Pentagon. His uniform looked exactly the same. His posture did not. He walked toward Aaliyah, stopping several feet away. For several seconds, he couldn't speak. Finally, he managed only 3 words. "I was wrong." Nobody interrupted. Bradley looked at the floor before forcing himself to meet her eyes. "I judged you before I investigated. I ignored every opportunity to verify the truth. I embarrassed my department." He swallowed hard. "And I embarrassed myself." The room remained silent. Everyone waited for Aaliyah's response. She looked at the red marks still visible around her wrists, then back at Bradley. "I accept your apology." Relief briefly crossed his face. Before he could speak again, Aaliyah continued, "But accepting an apology doesn't erase consequences." Bradley slowly nodded. "I understand. You didn't simply arrest the wrong person. You ignored procedures designed to protect every citizen." She glanced around the station. "If I had truly been an innocent civilian instead of a military commander, today could have ended very differently." Those words landed with even greater weight than the revelation of her position. Because everyone understood they were true. Marcus Reed stepped forward, carrying the completed investigation packet. "Officer Bradley Haines." He handed Bradley another document. "Effective immediately, your police authority is suspended pending final disciplinary review." Bradley accepted the paperwork without argument. Marcus continued, "The findings of internal affairs, along with federal investigative records, will be forwarded to the State Certification Board." Chief Grayson quietly removed Bradley's nameplate from the duty roster. No dramatic speeches, no shouting, just the quiet reality of accountability. Outside, reporters noticed movement near the entrance. Camera flashes intensified. Rebecca Sloan turned toward Aaliyah. "The media is waiting." "I know. The secretary has authorized a brief public statement if you wish." Aaliyah thought for a moment, then nodded. Minutes later, she stepped outside the station. Microphones immediately surrounded her. One reporter called out, "Commander Monroe, do you believe Officer Haines targeted you because you're a black woman?" The crowd fell silent. Aaliyah answered without hesitation, "I can't speak to another person's heart. I can only speak about actions." She looked directly into the cameras. "No American should lose their dignity because of assumptions. Not because of race. Not because of clothing. Not because someone believes they already know the whole story." Another reporter asked, "What do you want to happen now?" She smiled softly. "I want better training, better procedures, and the courage to verify before judging. I don't want this story remembered because a commander was arrested. I want it remembered because institutions chose to improve after making a mistake." The statement spread across television broadcasts before noon. Within hours, law enforcement agencies across the region requested copies of Arlington's revised verification procedures. The Department of Defense publicly confirmed that Commander Monroe had safely completed her classified mission later that afternoon. The delayed strategic briefing resumed without further incident. 3 weeks later, Chief Grayson stood before every officer in the department during mandatory ethics training. Instead of beginning with regulations, he played Bradley's body camera footage. The room watched every ignored warning, every declined phone call, every assumption. When the recording ended, Grayson addressed the class. "This isn't a lesson about military authority. It's a lesson about professional humility. The moment you believe appearances are evidence, you stop being an investigator." Months later, the Arlington Police Department introduced a new policy known unofficially among officers as the Monroe Verification Protocol. Before any arrest involving disputed federal credentials, mandatory verification through the appropriate agency became standard procedure. The policy was soon adopted by neighboring departments. Commander Aaliyah Monroe never asked for the protocol to bear her name. She simply returned to her work, protecting people who would never know her face, making decisions few would ever hear about, serving her country without expecting recognition, because true leadership had never depended on uniforms, titles, or applause. It had always depended on character, and character had remained unshaken long before the Pentagon called her. Commandé. The strongest people are often the ones who never need to prove who they are. Before judging someone's worth by appearance, pause long enough to seek the truth. Respect begins with listening, and justice begins with humility. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments and consider subscribing for more stories that remind us why character will always outlast prejudice.